lion's back and ready for 10th edition. And Kitty's got claws. Woo! Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek video. I am Phil, the Glacial Geek, and today I want to talk to you about the Dark Angels in 10th edition. So, GW has released the index for the Dark Angels, which essentially gives you all the rules for running all of the Dark Angel specific units that you weren't gonna find in the Space Marine index. But we still have all the access to the regular Space Marine models as well to fill out our army as we so desire. It's also worth noting that we will have the Oath of Moment rules, which we have in all of our individual units have that rule as well, which gives them the same thing that Space Marines have, which is you choose a unit in your command phase, and anybody who's attacking them gets to reroll hits and reroll wounds against them in the full game, which might be a little confusing if you've seen the battle reports up on GW's channel that they've been putting. They've been doing the combat patrol, which changes it slightly, but for this, for the full game, the full actual game of 40k, it's reroll all hits and wounds against that unit, and you get to choose a different unit at your next command phase. So it's pretty good, very good rule actually, and I think it's going to be very effective. But for the Dark Angels, we also got access to a brand new detachment. So as opposed to the Gladius detachment, which gives you the combat doctrines, the Dark Angels one gives you something called Grim Resolve, which means that when you are battle shocked, instead of dropping to OC 0, which would mean that you could not control an objective, you only drop down to OC 1. So if you are still OC 1, your unit gets battle shocked. It doesn't change you at all. But if you had more, then you would go down to 1. But it does mean that you can still hold objectives if you are battle shocked. Where previously other armies, as far as I can tell, don't have the ability to hold on to that. So if you have a unit of, say, intercessors back on your home objective, and they get shot up one guy's left back there, if he fails that battle shock test, in most armies you're either going to have to spend a CP or spend a CP to pass the battle shock test, or you're just going to be unable to hold that objective. And if you don't have the CP, if you don't want to spend the CP because you want to use it for something else, then you're just left with not holding that objective and not scoring it for that turn, because the battle shock happens before scoring primaries for the battle round. So in that case, if you have OC1 because you have Grim Resolve, you can still hold that. You don't have to worry. So if you know that Intercessor squad is just going to be sitting back there just hiding for its life and not doing anything, then it's not worth spending the CP. So it saves you CP, the ability to just have that unit back there, still have the OC1, still be able to hold that objective. It's not being threatened. You don't have to worry about spending the CP. So I think it's going to be super strong. It also lets us contest objectives in the middle of the board against the opponent if you're getting battle shocked, or if they have an ability to give you battle shock or make you take a battle shock test and you happen to fail it, even if you weren't at half strength. All of these things could help your opponent kind of hold objectives and take them away from you and do whatever. But this gives you the opportunity to have OC1 and still be a board presence on there, even if you fail a battle shock test, which is, I think, super, super impressive. I think it's a very strong ability. Is it combat doctrines? Honestly, I would argue yes. I think that because of the way that the game goes, a lot of the primary missions are going to be about holding objectives and being in certain places and being able to do certain things. Also, a lot of the secondaries don't require you to kill things. They require you to hold things and be in places. So having the ability to contest and having the ability to hold objectives even when you're battle shocked, I think is going to come in way more handy for scoring points and thus winning games in this new edition than would have something else that lets you be a little bit more killy. Honestly, I think it's a very strong rule. I think it's going to be very helpful for us. I think it's going to be very helpful for us, especially for big units that are just going to keep chonking up the board, like our Deathwing Knights or Deathwing command squads, which I'll get into in a bit, talking about them. And I think they're going to be very effective. And going further into this, I think that our individual units that we have access to that other Space Marines don't, are going to be very effective on the battlefield. For one, Lionel Johnson has the Fight First ability, which is going to become a much bigger deal, I think, in this edition than it has previous editions. Because what Fight First does is it puts you into the first bracket of the 2-bracket fight phase now. Because fight phase is broken up into 2 phases. Basically, you have the fights first, and then you have everyone else. And each of those different phases, you're alternating back and forth between the 2 players. But you start with the player whose turn it isn't. So, with the lion having fight first, if the opponent tries to charge you to try to keep you from being able to fight, the Lion's going to go first because you get to choose a unit first, and he's the one that you're going to want to start with just to get out there and slaughter. He's going in there with a ton of attacks with his close combat weapon, doing very effective work when he gets into close combat. And the fact that he can also gain you CP with his special rule, one of the special rules you can choose when your opponent tries to spend, tries once per turn, so it's on your turn and your opponent's turn, when your opponent uses a stratagem within 12 inches of the Lion, you can decide to basically interrupt it and make your opponent take a battle shock test. And you can also then get a CP, which is great because CP are way more hard to come by in this edition. You can get a CP. You can also then make your opponent take the battle shock test. If they fail that battle shock test, then they are not just battle shocked, but the effect of that stratagem is not in play, does not go off. But the stratagem still counts as having been used, so he can't use it on another unit. So say they were trying to overwatch you, you try to make them take the battle shock test, they fail the battle shock test, they first cannot overwatch you, but they also can't then decide to overwatch you with a different unit because of the way the wording is with the rule, which is what it's supposed to be doing. So he's going to be super effective. He's going to be a monster up in close combat. If he's within 3 inches of a of an Astartes infantry unit, he will be able to have the lone operative rule, which means you can't shoot him unless you're within 12 inches. And if you're within 12 inches of him to shoot him, then you're going to be within his easy move and charge range for him, so he can go in and just be a real beat stick on you in their combat. I also think our Deathwing command squads are going to be super effective. Looking at them there, basically they combine 3 of the characters from previous editions. So the champion, the banner bearer, the Deathwing ancient, the Deathwing champion, and the Deathwing apothecary, and they put them basically into a Terminator squad. And you can fill out the rest of the Terminator squad however you wish. I would suggest Thunderhammer Storm Shields because now you have 4 wound models that are going in there. They all have a 4-up invul save because that's what they've been given, and then they're going to have the Thunderhammers, which are going to be good in combat. You've got a Chain Fist on the Apothecary, who's good against vehicles. You've got the Champion, who's going to be able to put precision attacks. And while the Champion is in that unit, they get +1 to advance and charge, and the Heroic Intervention strat costs 0 CP. While the Apothecary is in there, they get to bring back a model in the command phase that was lost in a previous turn. And while the Ancient is in there, they get +1 to their OC, which makes them even better at holding objectives. So if they get battle shocked, they're going to have OC1, and then the Ancient is going to give them OC2, which is super effective because that's basically just like full strength beat sticks, which is great. Holding objectives, chunking up the middle, and just like take me down. You can't. So if they are going to be just going up there with the Lion, then the Lion gets in combat and just does his thing, and they're going to be protecting him from long range shooting before they can get into combat. I think it's going to be very, very effective. I'm also pretty impressed with Ezreal. I don't think he's quite as, he's not really going to be a beat stick, but the fact that he just gets you another CP in your command phase, I think is going to be a very effective tool. He's also going to give a unit that he's attached to sustained hits. So you put him in there with like a Hellblaster squad, and suddenly now they're going to be having sustained hits. So every hit of 6, they're getting an additional hit. And especially the way that Hazardous works now, you don't have to worry quite as much about rolling those ones because you're only going to roll 1 die per model that shoots as opposed to per shot. So now all of a sudden you're getting a ton of plasma shots in there that are going to be super effective with him, getting that CP, giving them a 4-up invul save, which is huge, and being able to give a 4-up feel no pain for 1 phase during the game against mortal wounds. And there's plenty of ways that people can put out mortal wounds at the same time that this was being released. The Deathwatch showed that they have a strat that's going to make their Stern Guard being pretty effective, where they can effectively put out, if everything goes well for them and they've got 2 units that are within half range and they hit everything and wound everything, they can put out 40 mortal wounds in a turn, in a phase, which is pretty incredible with the way that they have the strats work there. So it's a lot that gets to go put out there. And if if Ezreal has the ability to then give him a 4-up feel no pain, suddenly that squad that he's with is probably not going to be dying, and maybe keep them from being able to get that second round of shooting and keep down the number of shots that they get for that. So I think he's going to be a very effective leader there, and I think he's going to work really well with those units. One thing of thought about the Dark Angels armies here in 10th edition is Ravenwing, I think, are going to be very different, very, very different. Bike squads are now differently sized. Land speeders are now only down to one model per unit, so you can't have squadrons of land speeders. So if you had a full land speeder army, it's going to be harder for you to fit them all in. You're not going to be able to fit all of them in, basically, because they're going to be limited to the 3 per data slate there. And I think it's like basically the regular ones, you've got 2 different options that you can put in, and they're going to be limited to 1 each. So I think that Raven Wing will be effective. We don't have the same super doctrines that we had in 9th edition, so they're going to be a bit different. But Black Knights are going to be super cool. I think that they have the ability now when they charge to get, it's anti-monster and anti-vehicle 4+, which means that you're wounding knights on 4s with their close combat attacks. And they've got a whole bunch of them, and I think they're going to be pretty effective and pretty good as a good option for trying to handle and tie up and just beat up on a bunch of vehicles. I know vehicles can shoot out of combat, so it's not quite as effective as tying them up. But they're going to be at -1 to hit, which is always a fun thing to add on to someone trying to shoot you with it. It makes it a little bit harder for them to be able to do that. So in 10th edition, I think that the Dark Angels are in a very strong place. I'm not quite sure exactly how I'm going to kit them all out. I think that Terminators have a very strong place. They're going to be very effective, especially with Thunderhammer and Storm Shield. They're going to have 4 wounds each. With a Deathwing Command Squad, I think is going to be great. You have the Deathwing Terminator squads, and the Deathwing Knights have the ability to ignore -1 to all damage, and it's not to a minimum of 1. So I'm almost positive that's going to be changed, and that they're going to FAQ that away, that it will be still a minimum of 1. But for now, they have it where they just ignore all damage 1 weapons against them, which is, super effective. So you're not going to have people just like gunning them down with mass amount of shots, which is usually the way you take down Terminators. Just make them make saves over and over and over again. So I think they're going to be effective. Deathwing Command Squad is, I think, super effective, getting the abilities that they have to bring back guys and getting precision shots with the champion and getting to +1 to advance and charge with them. I think it's just going to be a very strong... I think they've got the basis for a very strong army. And if you get tired of having Grim Resolve and having the stratagems and the enhancements from the Dark Angels, you could always go as a Gladius force. And the point is, GW has said that all Astartes have access to Gladius, but basically you can't have like Torgadon, or you can't have Shrike in an Unforgiven task force, but you can have anybody else in a Gladius task force. And actually, you could run them still with that same color scheme. You just have to run them as technically as Dark Angels. You just can't have any named characters that aren't Dark Angels in an Unforgiven task force. But I still think it's strong. I think they've got a lot of tools in this edition. The edition is very different, so I think they're going to have to play differently. And it's going to take a bit to find out, but I think I'm super excited to see the fact that the Lion is a super effective unit. He feels like a Primarch now. He feels like he's got a presence on the board that cannot be ignored, and he's not just going to like fall over like wet tissue paper. I'm very excited for that, and I think you're going to see him a lot in this edition playing out there. Dark Angels have a lot of the abilities, have ability to get CP, which is strong. Getting CP, I think, is going to be huge in this edition, trying to keep up with that, because you start with none and you just start getting them 1 per player turn. But you can burn through them pretty quickly with all the different stuff. So the number of stratagems is lower, obviously, which is, I think, a good thing. I think it's that all of them feel effective and all of them feel like they have their moments to shine, which I think is really great. But I think that it's going to be hard to keep up on getting those CP, because you don't have you don't start with a bunch to keep you going early on. So any ability, especially with like Ezreal's ability to each command phase just get it, like you're starting off, you go turn 1, you've got 2 CP now that you can start doing anything with. So you could just heroically intervene turn 1 if your opponent acts a fool. And I think it'd be cool to be able to do that. I think they're going to be effective. I think Dark Angels, I'm excited to see them on the table. I'm excited to see what they can do. I think the units that I kind of mentioned, the Black Knights, I think are very, very good. They don't have assault weapons anymore, so you can't really advance them. They don't have turbocharge either, so even if you wanted to advance them, you're going to be doing the regular D6 advance with them. But their close combat weapons are cool. They charge into vehicles and monsters. They're going to be good. I think it's going to be a strong counter, like a strong punch that you can like bring up really fast and keep your opponent engaged before your Terminators move up the board as well. So I think that mixed wings are going to be a big place for the Dark Angels here. You know, Ezreal with the Hellblasters, with the Terminators moving up, chonking up the middle, the Raven Wing running up there with the Black Knights. I think it's going to be very, very cool to see them all on the table doing what they have to do, and I think 10th edition is going to be a good one for the Dark Angels. So, let me know down below what you think. Do you think that am I missing a unit that you thought was way better than the ones that I talked about? Did you think of some synergies that work out very well for you, in your opinion? I know Samael being able to advance and charge is pretty cool. I think that would be super effective, especially with Black Knights. And there's a lot of different things that you can use with these, but it's just kind of giving an overview of what I am excited about going forward with them. So it should be a lot of fun to see what happens. But let me know what you think is going to work well. What Space Marine units from the Space Marine Index do you think are going to be effective with us holding objectives and stuff like that? Just let me know down below, and we'll keep on the conversation. But until then, I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, stay safe and have fun.